Thank you, Kathy, and thank all of you for being here. It's a little warm in here, but I'm from Texas, so this is not warm to me. This is cold. Thank you for being here with us this evening. A special welcome to our teachers from across Massachusetts and from all across the country, some as far away as Hawaii, who are here to participate in our Approaching Walden program, which is now in its 16th year. We are proud to support teachers in developing place-based educational experiences for their students and in nurturing their appreciation for the historic and cultural and natural features of their communities. As a result, their students will become better stewards and better citizens, and I think Thoreau would be pleased to know that his writings and the land he loved are involved in such a noble enterprise. He was, after all, a teacher himself. As Kathy has mentioned, the Walden Woods Project is celebrating its 25th anniversary this year. And when we first began our work back in 1990, we had a clearly defined mission. And that was to halt two proposed commercial development projects that would have destroyed the historic and ecological integrity of this great landmark that is known around the world, Walden Woods. But after succeeding in preserving these key sites and many others, it became clear to us, abundantly clear, that there was much more work to do. Little did I know how much more work there was to do. But there was more work to do not only in protecting Walden Woods itself, but in sharing Thoreau's thoughts with a global audience through programs for teachers and students, through establishing a fine research library here in Walden Woods, which was always one of Thoreau's dreams. My colleagues and I understood early on that Thoreau's writings and philosophy resonated around the world. We knew that his messages about natural conservation and social reform and living a life of principle and purpose and having an abiding respect for nature and the environment were important to convey to a broad audience, especially at this time when we seek global solutions to profound human rights challenges and to monumental environmental crises, including global climate change. So tonight, once again, the thoughts and words of Henry David Thoreau have reached across the centuries, across the oceans, across geographic and political and cultural boundaries, to bring a remarkable man, Ali Takdera, to us here this evening. Back in 2007, the Walden Woods Project's curator of collections and our resident scholar, Jeff Kramer, received a few brief questions about Thoreau from a man in Iran. This man was working his way through Walden and was occasionally having some difficulty with how to interpret a particular word or passage. He's not alone. And this man thought it was because he was not a native speaker of English. But Jeff assured him that many people who grew up speaking English stumble with passages in Thoreau's writings. Ali Takdera chose as his text for the first Persian translation of Walden, the one edited by Jeff Kramer for Yale University Press. For several years, Ali and Jeff had an open-ended dialogue on how to translate the subtle nuances of one language into the equally subtle nuances of another. And I had no idea this was going on. They had a dialogue about how best to convey the multiple levels of meaning that appear in Thoreau's text. And Jeff soon came to realize that translating Walden was not for Ali simply a matter of getting the words right or bringing an American classic to the Middle East, but it was more a matter of introducing Scripture, a life-changing spiritual and philosophical text, to his people, in Iran. Ali believes with all his heart that our poets are the roads and the bridges and the windows and the doors that open our worlds to each other, and that Walden is the revival of many lost values. He says, Walden is not a book that begins from a cover and ends in another cover. Walden will stay in my heart to the last day it beats. And so it is with gratitude and respect and friendship that we welcome Ali Taqdera to America for the first time, and to Walden Woods and to the Thoreau Institute. My friend.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Don. I feel great to be here for the first time in body. I've been here with you through Walden and Emily Dickinson for a long time in spirit. Thoreau says of his life at Walden, this was sheer idleness to my fellow townsmen, no doubt. But if the birds and flowers had tried me by their standard, I should not have been found wanting. Having read this and finding myself in Thoreau's home, I walked through the woods to hear what else the birds and flowers had to say about the man we all love and in whose name we are here. I did it many times early in the mornings these past days. It was then that the birds told me the name of Don Henley. Yes, the man who kept this world alive and preserved the trees where the birds can nest and tell their stories about Henry David Thoreau to me and to many generations to come. Thank you, Don, for keeping Thoreau's memory and world alive. Just one line in Persian. Every child in Iran knows this line by heart. بشنو از نی چون حکایت می کند و از جدایی ها شکایت می کند. Listen to the reed flute as it tells its stories, as it complains of separations. On the day I arrived here, something happened that I think was not on purpose, but it did serve a very sacred purpose. My kind hosts at the Thoreau Society lost the tag that I was supposed to wear on my neck to introduce me and my name to the other guests and presenters during the annual gathering. As I was left behind, I suddenly felt that I was nobody with no name. But wasn't it wonderful? For a long time in my life, I had repeated Emily Dickinson's beautiful poem, I am nobody, who are you? And had answered her that I was nobody too. How could I now be here and bear the burden of my name in her actual land? The desire to lose the name as a sign of separation exists in Persian mystics too. I still remember the warm tone in my father's voice when he told me as a very young child, perhaps I didn't go to school, I don't know, I was very young, the story of a Sufi who knocked on the door of his teacher. The teacher asked, "Who is it?" The Sufi answered, "It's me." The teacher said, "Go away. There is no room here for you." The Sufi went away, traveled the world, and came back. He knocked. The teacher asked, "Who is it?" This time the Sufi answered, "Oh, beloved, it is you behind the door." In this way, the most attractive part of literature for me is the unique sense of unity that it brings to my soul, melting me into the rest of humanity. This dream of unity is all that is behind my 10-year journey to study, translate, and transfer Thoreau's message to my own people in Iran. As a translator, I have always been aware that in addition to names, as Emily reveals in her poem, language is another obstacle that falsely separates us from each other. In Rumi's epic book of mystical poetry named Masnavi, there is a story of 4 men who were quarreling over what to buy with a single coin someone had given them all. The Persian wanted to buy angur. The Greek intended to buy astafil. The Turk demanded uzum, and the Arab enab. While the fight was continuing bitterly, a mystic who was familiar with all the 4 languages stepped forward, took the coin, went to the market, and returned with grapes. For the 4 men were in fact unaware of the fact that angur, astafil, uzum, and enab all mean grapes. It takes a mystic to brush aside the apparent differences from humanity's face and bring their heart together in love. For love is the only thing that is worth spending the coin of our life on. Thoreau came to me in childhood. He came to me without a name, the way Emily would have loved. As a child, I was a big lover of Sadi and always heard that there was a poet in America who believed he was Sadi in the contemporary world. I never knew who he was. I kept asking about him for many years. Actually, it took me decades to realize that it was Thoreau. And I was the one who was destined to translate his first words into Persian and be the first man to bring his words to Iran. I still remember how I heard the first sentence from Thoreau on a $1 pocket radio in the year 1982 or 83. It said, "The man who goes alone can start today, but he who travels with another must wait until that other is ready, and it may be a long time before they get off." I love this sentence very much, but I did not know it was Thoreau's yet. What connected my heart deeply to these ideas from Thoreau was the lessons and the poets I had heard from my grandfathers and my own father about Persian poets and mystics. In a way, long before Thoreau's name entered my life, he was giving me a roadmap for the journey of my life. Just when I received my high school diploma and was ready for higher education, universities were closed in my country for cultural revolution. It was then that I thought I would not wait until that other was ready. I decided to be the man who goes alone. In this way, I continued my English through my own studies in my own little room. I was a man who struggled to learn a foreign language outside academic circles, a man who tried to translate the works of a totally unknown writer from a completely unfamiliar period of American literature. Nothing even from the whole American transcendentalism has been translated into Persian yet. While the US had absolutely no relationship with my country, Thoreau was difficult in any conceivable sense, but at the same time, he was the man who taught me how to go alone. He made the world less lonely for me. Why should I feel lonely? Is not our planet in the Milky Way? As I showed my comparison and contrast between Walden and Shakespeare's autobiographical sonnets, Walden took up a unique meaning for me. Even in American literature, it was still unique. In comparison to the sea in Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea, and the oceans in Herman Melville's Moby Dick, Walden Pond seems like a very humble choice for Henry David Thoreau in Walden. To make it even more intriguing, Thoreau reduces Walden Pond in rank and calls it a well in chapter 10 of Walden and says, "The pond was my well ready dug. What gives a greater wealth to Walden is that, unlike Hemingway and Melville, Thoreau does not send a fictional persona into imaginary adventures. Thoreau's eye and his direct presence in Walden adds a profound dimension to the book and sheds a revealing light on his sense of place in Walden. I spent more than 8 years on the careful study and translation of Walden. The word well is just one example of how I had to pause for a long time to translate a single word. It was in such a search that I noticed a chain of mystical references to the word well throughout Walden. I noticed that leaving the house of an Irishman in the chapter The Pond, Thoreau says, "When I had got without, I asked for a drink, hoping to get a sight of the well bottom, to complete my survey of the premises. But there, alas, are shallows and quicksands, and rope broken withal, and bucket irrecoverable." I believe that Thoreau's asking for a drink from the Irishman symbolizes what every man in the world asks others for, or what each of the world's inhabitants has to offer one another. With what we do, what we write and say, what we make and paint, what we invent, and with our own particular mode of life, let us have a well which is not shallow, a rope which is not broken, and a bucket which is not irrecoverably damaged. The Irishman's life was a disaster, not because he lived in a crumbling cabin whose roof leaked. The well within the Irishman's soul, the real well that Henry hoped to drink from, was too shallow. This man's life would continue to be a disaster even if he lived in a palace. For improved houses would not necessarily improve the man who resides in them. While civilization has been improving our houses, it has not equally improved the man who are to inhabit them. This was a sentence I was thinking about when I was in Dubai. I saw many improved skyscrapers, but I didn't see a man who would say such a sentence. Each personal disaster is a universal disaster. Each individual victory is a victory for the whole humanity. How can we help a wayfarer with a drink if our own wells, the wells that we ourselves drink from, are too shallow and our buckets and ropes broken? In the chapter Visitors, Thoreau says, "Many a traveler came out of his way, like me here today, to see me and the inside of my house, and as an excuse for calling, asked me for a glass of water. I told them that I drank at the pond and pointed thither, offering to lend them a dipper." I have never reviewed Thoreau's experience in Walden Pond as the solitary act of a hermit who brushed the world aside in favor of his own solitude. In the pond in winter, he says, "Thus it appears that the sweltering inhabitants of Charleston and New Orleans, of Madras and Bombay and Calcutta, drink at my well." His legacy is both Walden as one of the world's greatest literary masterpieces and the Walden Pond itself. It was in this sense that my neighbors on this planet in the Milky Way came to my side. I was no longer a man who was excluded from the academic world. I began a very hard and persistent search on the internet. I was among the first people in my country who grabbed the internet for the academic purposes seriously and did not let it go. I remember how I began my first communication with Miss Elizabeth Witherell, asking her for help. She immediately sent several copies of Walden and told me, "We are here to help. I will try to answer all your questions. Remember that I am in touch with almost all Thoreau scholars in America, and even when there is a question I cannot answer, I will find someone who can." That was enough for me. Miss Witherell then gave me the address to a listserv where I could send my questions. It was on that listserv that I met Dr. Richard Schneider, who is here tonight with us. He has been with me from that listserv for almost 10 years now. He took me through Concord the other day with my other dear friend who made this trip possible, Mr. Wallace Kaufman, and showed me in the real world what he has been teaching me in the virtual world for years. I later came to Kirk McLearn's, if I pronounce his name correctly, Dwight, Walden list. I owe Kirk and his list a lot. I met some of my life's best friends on that Yahoo group. One of them, Mr. Wallace Kaufman. We have been in touch with each other on an almost daily basis for the past 2 years. My children called him Uncle Wallace. Yes. I would like to extend my deep gratitude to Wallace and to Thoreau's great biographer, who is unfortunately absent due to health problem here, Mr. Robert Richardson, for their generous financial support for this trip. Without them, the trip would not have happened. Robert has written a number of essays for my future translations, which I will be honored to translate and publish in Iran. It's not just literature, it's the connection, that this literary work reflects to my people. It shows that friendship is possible. Now, Okay, and thank you also to the Thoreau Society and Waldenwood Project. In particular to Don Hunley, Kathy Anderson for their generosity. There are other names which I have been inscribed on my heart. Jeffrey Kramer, who has allowed me to use his Walden for my translation and written an introduction for me. Mr. Thomas Hood, they are not here, they're just here in my heart. From Walden List, who has helped me with many complications in Walden, with patience and extreme care for years. Austin Meredith, Professor Donald Ross, Dr. Annette Woodliff, they are very dear close friends of mine. Sue Petrovsky, who shared her love and understanding of Thoreau with me for years. She also sent me a copy of Jeff's Walden, which I used for my translation. And in the end, I would like to extend my love and thanks to somebody who is not here, but she will hear this, to my beloved wife, Mariam. At the end of the chapter Economy, in a story from Saadi's Golestan, the palm tree with its date is a symbol of generosity. And the cypress, which bears no fruit, is an evergreen symbol of freedom in my culture. Maryam symbolizes both for me. She is the beautiful cypress on whose branches have grown the translation of Walden, Life Without Principle, and Emerson's Persian poetry so far. She has endured a lot of difficulties in life over the past few years. That is why we have been able to dedicate our life to literature and poetry together. In the middle of a hostile city life, she showed me the beauty and peace that Thoreau witnessed in the trees, among the birds, and beside the Walden pond that he describes so lovingly in Walden. My only role in this great undertaking was that I was fully aware of how responsible I am to the huge support I was able to receive from my wife and from my friends. My wife, the only person in Iran, and my friends in the US. Thank you very much.
I've studied Persian for 1 semester, but I've forgotten it all. But we are related in many many ways. I also translated Jeff's Walden into Chinese.
This is great.
Yes, and the sample just, the book just came out. So it's a great honor here to
Thank
hear,
you.
to
I'm
hear
honored
speak.
too.
So can you share like what is the most challenging part of translating the book and what was the most joyful moment of?
One of the difficulties of Walden is that he defies, as I always told myself, he defies dictionary definitions. Many times he uses words in the meanings that are not familiar or, you know, common among people. Sometimes he deliberately uses them in opposite directions. So one example was just what I told you about Walden Pond being a well. It takes a long time for us to digest, you know, what he means. And he's the man who demands his readers to read his book, any book, and his book as deliberately as it has been written. So it actually has taken so far 10 years of my time and my brain work. And I still don't know how successful I am. Yes. Okay. Yes.
What is your dearest hope with the publication of this book in Iran?
I hope the mere publication is itself, you know, a great joy for me. My dearest hopes, you know, my one important hope is for my people to sense the connection, the closeness and similarities, the unique feelings that exist in Thoreau and their poets and mystics, and do not feel separated from the American people. Yes, please.
So following that question, what part of Walden's message do you think will most connect with an Iranian audience at this stage of history? What will they recognize and respond to?
I think what is to me, and I believe to many people in Iran, what is most important is Thoreau's mystical connection to nature. I come from the land of mystics. We have many mystics in my land, and poets and people have a very mystical spirit in my land. That part of Thoreau's character, I think, will be very charming for my people. Thoreau calls himself, I am a mystic. Yes, Wallace.
Would you say, just a few words, you talked about Iran being the land of mystics. And the mystics you've talked about are 800 years in the past. And they're still popular there, and as we were talking the other day, Rumi is one of the most read poets in America now.
Yes.
Could you tell a little bit about how they became a part of your life with your training and how that relates to other people in Iran?
You know, before the coming of the new technology and, you know, cell phones and tablets and computers and television, my past generations were very much tied to poetry. And I remember my maternal grandfather who couldn't write, who was not even able to write his own name, and he lived to be 100. To the last day of his life, he kept reading poems that I had not heard from him before. He knew thousands and thousands of lines of poetry by heart, and one of his hobbies was to keep reading, reciting poetry from his heart for anyone he saw. And those poems stayed in my heart and in my mind, and the first sentences that I read from Thoreau, you know, sounded very familiar and close to what I had heard before from our poets and mystics. My paternal grandfather was also a dervish who loved Rumi very much. And I was a small child when he died. I opened a small case, and found a beautiful book of Rumi. I could not read it very well then, but I knew it was a valuable book.
Yes, may I ask,
Yes.
when your book is published, will it circulate freely in your country? I mean, will there be any restrictions on the circulation?
I do not think Walden, because it doesn't have a very particular political nature. I do not foresee any political complications with Walden, but books generally should receive official permissions from our government, all books, not just Walden. Hopefully, I do not foresee any complications in that regard. Yes, please.
From what you say, it seems as though you came across Thoreau as a very young boy, and I wonder exactly how that happened.
You know, I loved Sadi very much as a young child. I do not remember exactly at what age it was, but I kept hearing that there was a writer, a poet in the United States who claimed, who felt he was Sadi in the contemporary world. I heard it just in literary circles from people who loved poetry, in our textbooks.
Can you give us some context for Sadi? What that means?
Sa'di is one of our history's greatest poets. One of his most famous poems is "Human beings are all the limbs of a single body. When there is a pain in any of the limbs, all the other limbs get restless. You who show indifference to the sufferings of others, you do not deserve to be called a human being. A human being, not a Muslim." Sadi is that part of my country and culture that is our window. Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about the process that you went through of learning English, how you started and how you continued and how you got to where you are today?
Before our revolution, you know, Americans had a channel in Iran, and it was always interesting for me to watch American cartoons and Western movies. Then I ended up in the eastern parts of the United States. And I believe it was when I entered school, my English was better than all my other subjects, you know. We had a very kind teacher. She was a lady, Mrs. Torkstade. I believe she paid a lot of attention to me and showed a lot of kindness. I think it has something to do with her. Maybe her kindness was one of the first, momentum. It shows what a great role teachers play in early ages in our lives. Maybe it was that, that was the reason that I took English seriously all throughout my life. But since after the revolutions, there was not any ties, any relationship with the Western world, particularly the United States. I didn't have easy access to sources for studying English. For a long time, I studied English through old newspapers and magazines and whatever film I could find. I just was serious and persistent until the day I found access to the internet, and it was a huge help. Yes.
I'm one of the teachers in the Institute. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Lord. But today at lunch, you were talking about your next project, trying to get schools to let you teach English to the children. I think everybody might be a little interested in that. Could you kind of...
Yes, in addition to translation, what I would like also to help a number of people to read these texts in their original language. So just before coming to the U.S., I signed a contract with an all-girls high school to teach English. And one of my plans, we have decided with the principal of the school to create an English atmosphere, a literary atmosphere in the school, and connect the souls of the girls to your literature and culture. And that was why I came to you and asked for help.
I think we're all excited about having our kids.
Thank you very much. People, especially our young generation, think that it is totally impossible to be able to talk to an American. So they would find it would be possible, and thank you for accepting to help. Yes, please. Hi.
I was just wondering, what was the process that you had while in Iran? Were you communicating with other scholars? Were there other people reading Walden in English, or were you talking to them about it before you reached out to us here? Or was that a simultaneous thing? Were you in academia there? And, just talk a little bit about that process.
Yes, I searched the internet and found the institutions, universities, or even private weblogs and sites that were connected to Thoreau. And I wrote many letters to those who ran the sites and weblogs. As I said, I talked to Miss Elizabeth Witherell. She's the one in charge of publishing Thoreau's journals. And
Were there people in Iran that you were communicating with, other scholars or academics?
No, with Thoreau, it's been only American scholars, and they have been always very helpful. And they have. What is most interesting about my connection with them is that none of them ever tried to impose his own particular view of Walden or the American culture and literature on me. I have always felt that I've been an independent thinker and I could discover my own Walden. They just helped me in a scientific, literary way and answer and try to be helpful and useful with my job.
Were your friends and associates supportive of your effort, or what did they think about you doing this? Did they think that it was a good thing, a bad thing, or sensible?
Actually, it's true, it's correct that nothing of Thoreau has been translated into Persian, but he is not unknown. Many people know him, and they only say that we know he's a valuable writer, but he's difficult to translate. And I wouldn't have been able to translate it, if it hadn't been for the enormous amount of help I received from my scholar friends. They are supportive in words. And that matters too, of course. Yes, please. Yes, Mike.
Now that you've finished Walden, what are you looking to translate other Thoreau texts?
Yes, I have set a plan for the next 5 and 10 years of my life. Yes. If I survive to stay a literary translator, which is doubtful, I'm not sure, I plan to continue with Thoreau's essays, Emerson's essays, Thoreau's books, Emerson's books. I don't know. There are, certain endeavors in life that you are sure to be defeated in. It's only how far you can get along and, what you can leave behind. Yes, I plan to, actually I have translated Life Without Principle. Yes, please.
I was wondering, as you're translating and you encounter a pun in Thoreau, how do you translate a pun?
Sometimes I fail. Yes. But my favorite poet, Persian poet Hafiz, is particularly fond of puns. So I have grown up with puns. Walden is a very, very difficult text. Such discussions should continue in writing. And I should have a better presence of mind to answer you. But, sometimes you lose a pun somewhere and can create a pun in your own language where Thoreau, for example, I have also translated a few ruba'is from Omar Khayyam into Persian. So, tell me, what is a morning rooster? A morning rooster. Rooster, the bird in your culture. The rooster that sings in the morning, yes? But I'd say it is a rooster that mourns for you because you've been sleeping while another night of your life was passing while you were sleeping, and you were ignorant of that. And this pun happened in English. Omar Khayyam's poem does not contain this pun. So you see, this is an example of how a pun can be created in another language, but it does not exist. And I think it's an acceptable pun. So I give you an actual answer. Yes.
I'm very interested about how the people of Iran view some of the big environmental challenges that we face on a global level. Like, is there a great familiarity with climate change and with, biodiversity issues, or, you know, obviously this is part of you know, Thoreau's legacy.
This is not something that is not much discussed, you know, in our newspapers and media in general, and unfortunately people do not pay much or proper attention to. I think one of the significance of Thoreau's books might be this particular subject. You know, we are facing a huge deforestation, we are using our water resources. Do you know what qanats are? Qanats are underground channels that Iranians made to carry water across hundreds of kilometers through their deserts. They are so long that they can circle the earth several times. They have a very sophisticated engineering. I've heard that they are more than 30 times the length of the China Wall. So we didn't waste our labor building a wall. We created life. Yes, but unfortunately they are getting dry. Yes, Dwight.
If you would like to tell the anecdote, just because it reveals a side of you, I think that we haven't heard about, of when you were a soldier in the Iranian-Iraq war and you were up in the mountains and it was cold.
Yes.
It was one of the things you wrote on the internet that has always stayed with me. If you could say a few words on that, I think people would appreciate it.
I expressed them in writing. I described the beautiful nature that I saw and watched carefully in western Iran, on top of the mountains on which where I served my army service. I did not speak about the war, but I can do that again in writing. That's very difficult to remember. I appreciate the fact that you still remember my descriptions.
It was a combination of the beauty, the coldness that you felt, and the underlying danger that you knew was out there. It was the way those
Yes.
three that you actually did put it in writing on the internet once. That was
Yes,
all
that was something I wrote, and I do not remember and do not have the ability to make them in speech here. Yes.
I have another language question. When countries are isolated, as Iran has been now for 30 plus years, there's often linguistic effects. We went to China and Burma in the mid-1980s, where you'd find people who were very old who learned perfect English in the 1930s, and then younger people in China, they've been forced to learn Esperanto if they wanted to learn a Western language. So there's a large Esperanto population, but not a large English-speaking population. What is the language situation in Iran now? If people know something other than Persian, what else do they know?
If you come to Iran, you will find millions of students who go to English classes. They have always been doing that, and there has never been any interruption. I only can say that the system of teaching English, even in our private schools, is not very efficient. But there have never been any obstacles for the students who really want to learn English. I am an example of somebody who started English during the period that you mentioned, and I don't know how successful I have been. At least I translated Walden, something that was not done when you were still in Iran. I also discovered an allusion to Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, and it was a small step, but to me it was very important. Yes.
Obviously, you've been very busy for the last 10 years, but is there any other American literature that comes to mind, either modern or classic, that you've also enjoyed that you can tell us? And also, as a teacher, is there any Iranian author that you could recommend for us to read or students to read that we might be able to find?
Do you mean a contemporary writer or poet, or a classical one?
Either.
I have heard that Rumi is currently the most popular and famous poet in the United States. I wonder if you're familiar with his poetry. Yes, I would recommend Rumi. He is my favorite poet. Hafiz is very difficult to translate. I don't think there is any reliable translation of Hafiz. The famous German poet Goethe even decided to learn Persian in order to read Hafiz. So I would very much love to offer you to study Rumi. I think there are close similarities between Rumi and Thoreau. Yes.
school, what is a mystic? You refer to mystics. How would you explain what that is?
You know, let me give you an example from a mystic. One day a mystic was walking when they saw a mill for grinding wheat. He showed the mill to his student and said, that is Sufism or mysticism. You get the coarse grains and deliver soft. So it can contain many, many different definitions for many different people. But I would say a mystic is a man who sees something, it has a transcendental view, sees something else beyond the apparent world. Thoreau says, the lake is the eye of the earth. That is a very mystical sentence. Yes.
This is more a translation-related question. So, how did you translate all the plants and birds that probably they never existed in Iran?
Yes.
How do you
Yes.
find their
I found a friend who had written a dictionary for plants and had not been able to publish it in Iran. So I put his dictionary to use with my translation. And Mr. Ghazai, he's a very kind friend of mine, and without him, that part would have been totally, I know what a big trouble that is, because Walden is packed with the names of numerous plants and flowers, which are totally unknown to me. Living in a city, I do not see even ordinary trees that sort of, yes. So that was a total dead end for me. If it had not been for my friend's help, Mr. Ghazai, who must be 80 now, I wouldn't have been able to conquer that difficulty.
That's fortunate for both of you.
Yes. What did you do?
Dictionaries.
Do you have a dictionary that?
Friends.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The problem with the names of the plants is that even in the United States, in different regions, they have different names. Yes, this is one of the tortures that you have to endure in the world. Yes?
Since you live in the city, Ali, do you have any places where you take your family to see nature, to see some trees? And,
Not much. Not much. And that is, in fact, something that makes Walden very special to me. It brings something that my life desperately lacks. Other than a park or two near our house, which are very beautiful, and whatever of nature we have in our country is unfortunately being destroyed.
So many, many years ago when I was in college, I remember spending a long time wrestling with this book, American Renaissance, by F.O. Matheson. Is this a book that's known in Iran or known to you?
No, it is not. American Renaissance is totally unknown in Iran as a concept. So, of course, we have a very deep culture. We know what Renaissance is, and we will. It's that no work has yet been translated. It's not just we will be unable to understand you, especially with the help we are able to get from your scholars. Yes.
We'll get this book to you. It is directly.
Thank you very much. I think with Thoreau, especially with Thoreau and Emerson, we, the fact that, please do not underestimate us. We come as a reader or translator. We come. We are one of the last people to come to Walden, but we are not the least. We are already in Walden. When he was first, Thoreau believed that he lived under the same skin with Saadi. So actually, when he was holding the pen and writing Walden, Persian blood sometimes ran through his fingers. We were inside Thoreau, and we are in. Did you know? I'm sure that you have actually in the end of chapter economy, it's a story from Saadi that you are translating. It's not Walden. Right. So we are in Walden. We are in American transcendentalism. Yes. Okay.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you.